One of the things I love to make is my challah. To start, I'll grab my flour and sugar. I'll get my flour into the bowl of my stand mixer. And you can make this in a stand mixer or by hand. This is all-purpose flour, but occasionally I'll jazz things up and substitute half of it for whole wheat flour or rye flour. I also like throwing in some seeds to this, or maybe even some dry spices like cardamom or cinnamon work great in challah. Next, I'll add my sugar and some salt. I'll mix this to combine. That's good. Now I'll mix up my wet ingredients. I have 4 large eggs here and some flavorless oil. Will make it deliciously moist. I'm mixing these to combine. Sometimes I like adding honey instead of sugar. So if I'm doing that, I would add that to this mixture instead of adding it to the flour. With my mixer on low, I'll pour in my egg mixture. And I also have some dry yeast activating and some warm water with a little bit of sugar that will help the bread rise and make it fluffy. It smells cozy. I'll knead this for about 7 to 10 minutes until it's smooth and slightly sticky. So when it's sticking to the bowl like this, that's a sign that I need to add a bit more flour. I want to try not to add too much flour because that could create a dry bread. I think we're ready. So I'll scrape this off of my dough hook and then transfer it to a clean bowl to rise. I'll coat it with a little bit of oil so it doesn't stick. I'll stretch it into a ball so it's smooth. Give it a slap. Zhuzh it around, flip it over, so now it's all coated in oil, and now I'm gonna cover it with plastic wrap. And this is gonna rise in a draft-free place for about 2 hours or until it's doubled in size, and then we'll be ready to shape it. My dough is almost finished rising, so right now I am prepping my fillings for my challah. Challah is great on its own, but I love to get creative and add different fillings and stuff it with scallions or cheese. Or you could also go a sweet route and add chocolate chips. And of course, it's really good plain too. Challah is a traditional Jewish egg bread. Growing up with a Jewish mom, we always had challah around the holidays. There were challah holidays and there were matzo ball holidays. And the challah holidays were the best. It was the first bread that I ever learned to make, and I remember helping my mom braid it when I was little, and then when I got older and had my first apartment in New York, this was one of the first recipes I ever made. My dough is looking great. It has risen. And now I'll divide it into 3 equal parts, and these will become my 3 braid strands. I will roll them out into long, skinny ovals. Now, if this were a normal, plain challah with no stuffings in it, I would just make logs and braid them together. But because I'm adding my butter, onion, and garlic, I'm gonna roll them out. I'm just flattening it out so it's about, I don't know, between like 1/4 and 1/2 inch thick. All right, I am gonna brush the top of these with some melted butter. I'll sprinkle it with my garlic and onions. Now I'm gonna roll these up lengthwise and then pinch the edges to seal everything in. I've got my 3 strands. Now's the time for the fun part when I get to braid. Now I like to start my braid from the middle. I find that I can get a more even shape that way. If I start from one end, I find that my braid can look a little oblong. I cross the middle strand, and then the left side, I'll place it over that strand. And I'm helping it along each way because it is kind of a delicate dough to handle. And when I get to the end, I'll give them a little pinch and tuck them under. And now the other side, you have to braid it under the center strand since we're going backwards. Right, under, just like braiding hair. Great. Let me grab my pan. I've lined it with parchment so that it doesn't stick. And now this is gonna rise for another 30 minutes or so because we wanna get it extra fluffy. And then I'll brush it with an egg wash that has a bit of honey in it. Sprinkle it with some flaky salt and then bake it at 375 for about 35 to 45 minutes until it's golden brown on top. Looks perfect. I can't imagine a better smell. I'm gonna let it cool a little bit and then dive right in. Oh, and the inner part.
Yes, gotta go right for the center.
Yeah.
This is perfect. It's gonna give me the energy I need.
My mozzarella sticks. So to start, I'm chopping up a block of mozzarella into sticks. And I've thrown this in the freezer for a few minutes before chopping because it makes the sticks easier to cut. And now I'll set up my breading station. I've got 3 shallow bowls, and I'll set them up in a row. And to the center one, I'm gonna crack in 3 eggs. I'll beat these up. And now to the first bowl, I'm gonna add half a cup of flour and a good pinch of salt. I'll just give it a toss with my hands. And then in my last bowl, I'm gonna add my breadcrumbs. I'm using panko breadcrumbs and traditional breadcrumbs here. I love the combination of textures and the added crunch from the panko. I'll add half a cup of breadcrumbs and 1 cup of panko breadcrumbs. Panko breadcrumbs are bigger and fluffier than traditional, so these are gonna make the texture of the breading even better. And then I'll also add half a cup of Parmesan cheese, which will add amazing flavor to the coating. And now I'm gonna season this mixture. I'll add a teaspoon each of onion powder, garlic powder, and Italian seasoning. I'll just mix to combine. Now these are ready to bread. I've got my breading station set up, my flour, my eggs, and my seasoned breadcrumbs. Here I go. The flour helps the eggs stick, so I'll get them completely coated in flour, and then I'll transfer them to the egg. This gets a little messy, but it's worth it. I'll make sure they're completely coated, and then roll them in the breadcrumbs. And I'm gonna designate my right hand for dunking in the egg and my left hand for the breadcrumbs. It makes this process way cleaner. There is some serious mozzarella stick magic happening right now. Now I'm gonna give these another dunk in the egg and coating in the breadcrumbs because this will make the crust doubly as thick, doubly as good. It's gonna hold the cheese in, it's gonna make these crunchier and more flavorful. This is peak mozzarella stick. Now they go back into the breadcrumbs. 2 breading layers. Oh my gosh. These look incredible. I'm gonna transfer them to a plate and then keep on breading. I'm ready to fry now. I have a couple of inches of oil heating up to 375. I'm gonna fry these in batches until they're golden. It'll only take a couple of minutes. It's already starting to smell really good. I think it's that Parmesan in the breading that's frying right now. Oh yeah. These are ready to come out. I'm gonna transfer these to a wire rack that I have on top of a sheet pan, and that's gonna allow any excess oil to drip off, and it'll keep them crispy on the bottom too. Look at that cheese ball. Let's eat. Today I'm making some chocolate donuts that are gonna be infused with coffee and sprinkled with toasted hazelnuts. I'm gonna be making baked donuts instead of fried donuts. I love the texture, and I find that baked donuts are much easier to make rather than heating up a huge vat of oil. So I'm just greasing my donut pans with some spray. And if you don't have donut pans, you could bake this batter in a cupcake tin. I have my dry ingredients here, and in my big bowl, I'm gonna add a cup of sugar, a cup and a half of all-purpose flour, half a cup of unsweetened cocoa powder, 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt. Always important to have salt in sweets. A teaspoon of baking powder, and half a teaspoon of baking soda. Once this is combined, I will grab my wet ingredients. So I have an egg here and some buttermilk, which will add some nice tang. And I'll crack this into my bowl. Now I'll add 6 tablespoons of buttermilk, 6 tablespoons of flavorless oil. I have some brewed coffee here. I've let it cool, and that's because when I add it to my egg, I don't want it to cook the egg. Just a teaspoon of vanilla extract is gonna bring this flavor over the edge. I'll add the wet ingredients to the dry ingredients and mix to combine. I'll scrape the batter into the piping bag. These are ready to bake. I'm gonna stick them in the oven at 375 until a toothpick inserted into the center comes out clean, about 12 minutes. Every donut needs a glaze. I'll grab a 1.5 cups of powdered sugar, and I'm gonna add a tablespoon of buttermilk. Whole milk is also fine. I'm gonna add 2 tablespoons of coffee. I'm gonna mix this until it's very smooth. Okay, it's time for the best part, the decorating. I've got my glaze here, my donuts are fully cooled, and then I'm gonna top them with some toasted hazelnuts. I've got my sprinkles on standby, because duh. And all I'm gonna do is dip my donuts into the glaze. I'll have them go about halfway and let any excess drip off. Once I've dipped it into the glaze, I'm gonna dip it into the nuts and roll it around and get them evenly coated. And they're not done until they get some sprinkles. Ha, that's beautiful. I am making one of my top 5 favorite foods with one of my top 5 favorite people.
Thanks.
Okay, so my chicken schnitzel is juicy fried chicken that's pounded extra thin, so it's really, really crispy. So we are pounding out our chicken breast so that it's really thin so that it gets extra crispy. Once it's about like a 1/4 inch, you just want it as thin as possible without it breaking. So once it's that thin, then we can get onto the braiding. Okay, these are pounded perfectly. Let's get on to breading. Okay, we're gonna set up a dredging station. We're gonna get flour in this pan. And then do you wanna crack 4 eggs into this pan? Okay, so the chicken is going to get coated in flour, dunked in egg, and then coated in panko breadcrumbs, which will make it really, really crunchy. Do you wanna whip up the eggs with a splash of water? That just makes it easier to coat. And then I'm just gonna add some paprika to the breadcrumbs and then season them with salt and pepper. It'll be so good. Okay, we've got our breading station set up. We've got flour, egg, and breadcrumbs. And now we're just gonna dunk the chicken in these 3 things in that order. So we just take a piece of chicken and get it evenly coated in the flour. And this is gonna help the egg stick. And just make sure that it's all covered in the egg because that is gonna help the crunchy breadcrumbs stick.
And we want maximum breadcrumb adherence.
Yes, exactly. Okay, this one is ready to fry. I have some flavorless oil heating up on the stove, and I'm gonna gently transfer it right in here. And these are getting fried at 360 for a couple of minutes on each side until they're golden brown. Let me flip it. Okay, look at this gorgeous golden color.
Oh my gosh, that looks good.
Yeah, this is a beautiful schnitzel. Okay, I'm gonna transfer it to a wire rack, and this is going to keep it crispy. And then I'm just gonna sprinkle it with a little salt and pepper. And now these can hold in a warm oven so that they stay hot until our friends arrive.
Enough chatting, let's get frying.
Gently. It's important not to overcrowd the pan, otherwise it'll drop the temperature of the oil. And we don't want that because then the oil will soak into the breading and make it taste oily. And I keep my thermometer clipped to the side of the pan so that I can make sure that the oil is hot enough at all times. I'll keep on frying these in batches. And then I'll hold these in the oven at 250 to keep them crispy until my friends get here. Let's finish off that schnitzel. Oh my, these look incredible. They are golden and crispy. For the finishing touch, I'll sprinkle them with some parsley. And now schnitzel needs a fresh squeeze of lemon, so I'm gonna garnish with some lemon wedges. I bet Nick is outside already pouring some beers. I'm gonna grab my bites and take them out, and we are going to eat. Wunderbar! My bacon, egg, and cheese turnovers are one decadent little meal in a handheld flaky pastry. I'm starting with the best part, the bacon. I'm crisping it up in my pan. Now while this continues to crisp, I'm gonna whip up some eggs. I'm gonna scramble 4 eggs with some mozzarella cheese. That's gonna get really melty inside of these pastries. Now I'm gonna add some shredded mozzarella. It's gonna make these eggs creamy and gooey. And I'm also gonna chop up some chives for a nice pop of freshness. I'll pour these right in. Okay, I'm gonna check on my bacon now. Oh, it's looking great and really crispy, just the way I like it. Okay, I'm gonna transfer this to a paper towel to drain any excess grease. And I'm gonna use the bacon fat that's in my pan to cook my eggs. Now I'm gonna cook these eggs until they're just set. I do not wanna overcook them because otherwise they'll get dry. And even if they're a tiny bit undercooked, that's okay, because once they get put into the puff pastry and baked, they'll complete their cooking. My eggs are looking great. I'm gonna remove them from the heat, and I'm gonna transfer them to a bowl so they don't continue cooking in the pan. Now I'll season with salt and black pepper, and I love hot sauce on my scrambled eggs. So I'm gonna add a few shakes of that. And I'm also gonna add some scallion cream cheese, which will add great creamy tanginess. And now I'll get my puff pastry. My puff pastry has thawed overnight in the fridge so that it's soft and easy to work with. And now I'm gonna roll it out onto my work surface. And I'm gonna dust my surface with some flour so that the puff pastry doesn't stick. Okay, I'm gonna roll this out until I have a 15 by 10 rectangle, and that's gonna make it so that I can have 6 big squares. Now I'm gonna cut this into 2 rows of 3 squares. So first, I'm gonna divide it in half along the equator, and now I'll divide it into thirds vertically, making sure I have perfect squares. Okay? Now I'll transfer my squares to my baking sheet that I've lined with parchment paper so that they don't stick. I'll evenly space these out, and now I'm ready to assemble. So to assemble these, I'm first gonna add a smear of scallion cream cheese. I'm just adding a thin layer. I don't wanna add too much filling, otherwise they might start leaking out in the oven. Next, I'm gonna add some bacon, which I'm just gonna rip up with my hands. And I'm adding the bacon underneath the egg so that the bacon doesn't poke through the puff pastry when I fold it over. Okay, next I'm gonna add some of my scrambled egg mixture. Oh, these are gonna be delicious. Now to seal these up, I'll make an egg wash. I'll just crack an egg into a little bowl. I'll add a tiny splash of water, and then I'll whip it up. And then I'll brush this around the borders, which will act like the glue to hold the turnover shut. Now I'll fold these over and then pinch the edges to seal them shut. And I wanna pinch the edges well so that they don't open up in the oven. It's okay if at this point they look a little rustic, because the magic of puff pastry is that in the oven, it's gonna puff up and look beautiful no matter what. So now before these go in the oven, I'm gonna brush the tops with egg wash, and that's gonna help them get golden and shiny. And then it's also going to help my topping stick. I'm gonna sprinkle the tops of these with everything bagel topping. Now, these are gonna bake at 375 for 30 minutes until they're golden brown and puffy. These puffed up perfectly. Look at those layers. They are gonna be so flaky and buttery and good. I can't wait to eat these. Okay, I'm gonna pack these up, and I'll pair them with a little bit of ketchup. They're so cute.